Let's discuss the new head coach, Dave Canales, and what he's been able to do in rejuvenating quarterbacks. We saw it with Geno Smith, which we thought couldn't be done. And then he turned around and did it with Baker Mayfield. And now he gets a young player in Bryce Young that I think is really good, but was poorly coached last year. Kind of like how it's being able to get this Carolina Panther team, which has a pretty good, strong defense, get that offense rolling. Young, Deontay Johnson. Now, really, right now, Chelsea, in fantasy circles, everybody's drafting the young running back Brooks from Texas that's coming into the season with a torn ACL. Go get Chuba Hubbard about 3 or 4 rounds later if you want to go into that backfield. But really, it's the pass catchers in Carolina with Deontay Johnson and crew that has me intrigued. So I think Carolina jumps to the top of the division. Yeah, it's a long shot, but this is the NFC South. All of these teams are really a long shot. Whoever wins this division, more than likely, will not be playing in the division round of the NFC playoffs.
Yeah, we've seen it the past 2 years. Even though maybe the Bucks were kind of
The Bucks did
the
make it, yeah.
anomaly, just because they got hot down the stretch, but still the regular season. I don't think they won 10 games. I'm pretty sure they won 9 games last year. So it's not like they were head and shoulders above the rest of the division. And guess what? They were 6-1 to win the NFC South going into last year. It was the Saints who were favored simply because they had the best schedule. So I think that we need to get out of the habit of just handing somebody the division just because they have the best quarterback. Cough, cough. Looking at you, Atlanta Falcons at -120. For me, I'm just going to go with the Bucks here. I don't think they're as good as they were last year, but still they've got a lot of talent on the offense. Baker Mayfield can at least be decent, and they've got some good pieces on the defense as well. And I believe they just signed Tristan Wirfs, which is a huge deal. That
Yes.
was kind of the news that I was waiting for because it all stems from the offensive line. We know that your quarterback needs time to throw. Your running back needs some holes to run through. Tristan Wirfs is one of the best offensive linemen in all of football. So glad they got that deal done. As far as other bets in this division, we have talked about, from a fantasy perspective, the Falcons are going to have a ton of weapons. It is a huge upgrade, obviously, at quarterback. Last year, looking at the Falcons quarterback room, one of the worst ones in all of the NFL. Now they get Kirk Cousins, which maybe you don't believe in him to take the team to a Super Bowl. But I will say this about Kirk Cousins. The guy is good at posting good numbers. He's had some great seasons, statistically speaking, and he's led some, supporting cast members to great seasons as well. Look at Justin Jefferson, obviously an A1 talent, but still the point still stands. So from a fantasy perspective, who stands out to you on the Falcons?
On the Falcons, it's the big three. It's Bijan Robinson, it's Drake London, and it's Kyle Pitts. And you're going to pay a price for the first two. Bijan Robinson right now in early drafts. You could have a draft this weekend. Bijan Robinson going right there, smack dab in the middle of that first round. I like Robinson a lot. He's my RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey coming into the year. And then you get into the second round. Hell, you can start your draft with two Atlanta Falcons. You can go Bijan Robinson, Drake London. I don't know if they're going to have that kind of offense to support that. But London is a player who is extremely talented, and now he gets a guy who's going to get him the football and a head coach who's not going to stop him from getting the football. And obviously, fantasy owners have been waiting for the breakout year for Kyle Pitts for years now. He's going like about in the sixth round of drafts, probably like around that sixth tight end off the board. I'm still optimistic about Pitts, despite him letting fantasy owners down every season since he's been in the NFL. But I think this is a new situation right here with the right coaching staff in place. So that's what the Atlanta Falcons look like. And listen, they got solid, talented guys that are going to be dudes that are going to be at some of the top point scorers of their position. So they do have the good offense, and they have that nice track to run on down there at their home stadium. So yeah, I like the Falcons' fantasy pieces a lot.
Yeah, and I think from a usage perspective, Bijan Robinson is in for a big year. Because last year, I think a lot of people saw little flashes of his talent and thought, why aren't they giving this guy the ball more? And I think that we're going to see a lot more of Bijan this year. And we've even seen the coaches talking about it. The offensive coordinator went on the record and talked about how they're going to be using Bijan Robinson similar to Christian McCaffrey in a role where not only is he running the football, but he's going to be catching passes. I think this translates to a lot of touchdowns. Because think about Christian McCaffrey. If you're going to be using Bijan in a Christian McCaffrey role, think about how many anytime touchdown bets that people cashed on Christian McCaffrey last year. I think by the end of the season, he was like minus 200 to score a touchdown
Yep.
in every single game. So I understand the hype there. I just hope that it comes to fruition. Because I remember last year, it wasn't quite as, overblown, but they talked about this with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I got roped into playing Jahmyr Gibbs and all of his props in the first game of the season, and then didn't play him as much as I was hoping. But Bijan Robinson due for possibly a big year. Looking at the rest of the teams in this division, are there any other players for you? Like a couple that I think we touched on, Mike Evans and maybe Chris Olave. Would you take a flyer on any of those players over their season long props?
Yeah, definitely with Mike Evans. We know what Mike Evans is. He's really a gold jacket walking right now, and nobody really
Mm-hmm.
even talks about it. Every season, Mike Evans gives you the type of numbers that you expect a alpha wide receiver to put up. He's had over 1,000 yards receiving in every season of his career.
Mm-hmm.
136 targets last year, the second most in his career. So listen, I understand you get fatigued on some players. You might get tired of seeing some guys, but he is going around after Devontae Adams. He's a better player than Devontae Adams. And then Chris Olave. Listen, we've seen these Ohio State wide receivers perform excellently in his first two seasons in the NFL. 138 targets last year, 119 the year before, 87 receptions last year, getting in the end zone 5 times, so over 1,100 yards receiving now. The yards per catch last year dropped down under 13. You kind of want to see that for an elite wide receiver. You want those yards per reception to be in that 15, 16 range. You want a real elite guy like Tyreek Hill. You can get up to the 17, 18. So you just worry about the quarterback situation being inconsistent with the Saints. And like I said, if there was a book that gave us odds for the first head coach fired, I'm pretty sure Dennis Allen would probably might even be minus money.
Yeah, I think their offense was really tough to watch last year. I don't think that's on Chris Olave at all. I think it's maybe the pedestrianness of what we saw from Derek Carr last year. But I think what also goes in Chris Olave's favor is, again, back to the usage. If you look at the depth of the Saints at receiver, it's not very deep. Like Chris
Yeah.
Olave is far and away the number one receiver. So I think, from a targets perspective, because that goes into the equation as well if you're playing fantasy, you need somebody who's going to get, the massive target share that we're probably going to see from Chris Olave. And same goes for Mike Evans. Led the NFL in receiving touchdowns. Of course, he has probably a better receiver, with him when it comes to Chris Godwin. But Mike Evans is the guy in the end zone because he looks like a tight end. Like the guy is big. He is a mismatch when it comes to the secondary. So I'm big on him once again when it comes to a props perspective.